Welcome to the 3R's of application software end-of-life planning. My name is Craig Yellick, Vice President and Chief Solution Architect for Alto Consulting and Training. Alto has a 30-year history of successful software solutions. We deliver services in several areas, including software development, cloud and productivity platforms, systems engineering, as well as a wide variety of training options that tie it all together. Today we're going to be covering the two questions that I always ask when evaluating software end-of-life situations. These are the questions that drive the decision-making process and how to proceed. We're going to talk about how you judge risk versus the return of making that investment. And we'll cover Alto's hybrid solution, which we've found is usually the superior way to handle this situation. And if you stay through to the end, you'll see we have a special bonus offer for a $800 value of consulting. The first question you have to ask yourself, is this an acute or a chronic problem? Are you being forced to retire an app because it's no longer supported? Or could you muddle along for a while as is? If you're forced to retire an app, it's usually because the operating system, database, hardware, even the programming language is no longer supported. Or it's technically supported, but the cost makes it unsupportable. Throughout our 30-year history, Alto has helped customers move off IBM platforms like the OS/2 operating system, as well as the System 36 and AS/400 larger systems. In the Microsoft arena, we've moved folks from DOS to Windows-based systems, and of course everybody remembers the Windows XP end of life back in 2014, have helped many applications migrate off that platform as well. The key here is that sometimes your apps are working just fine, but you can't rely on them to support a business. So when you're forced to change, it's a terrific opportunity that should not be wasted. The other opportunity is that you can muddle along indefinitely. Being able to muddle along might seem like a more desirable solution, at least at first, but it does complicate your planning process because you're allowed to put off difficult decisions month after month. Just recently, we helped an organization shut down a Windows XP workstation running in a sandboxed virtual machine. The VM was required because of the substantial threat posed by allowing a Windows XP workstation on a corporate network. The setup was expensive to create and maintain and a hassle to use. However, it worked, and it allowed the company to keep putting off the inevitable permanent fix. Staff time and IT resources were effectively wasted because it was always possible to wait one more month before finding a proper fix to the situation. Calculating a return on investment ranges from quite easy to very difficult depending on your circumstances. If you have an acute problem and you have to get off the platform that you're on, it's a fairly straightforward ROI process. You have your existing application, and if you recreate it under new technologies, ostensibly you're going to get the same value that you used to get out of it. The challenge here is balancing that return on investment versus the sometimes considerable risk that you're taking in your attempt to mitigate this problem. The biggest factor is that you're running up against the thing that economists call opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is defined as the loss of potential gain. Let's emphasize the word potential gain from other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. And the example they're using there about idle cash balances lets you know this quote is a little old. Nobody worries about lost interest these days. Anyway, the opportunity cost of making a decision has to be weighed against the possibility that you don't ever really get the gains that you're looking for. This is one of the most difficult aspects of end-of-life software planning, and this is where most of our customers have found they need the most help really getting a handle on this issue. So once you've decided if you have an acute versus chronic problem, the second question is, do you start completely over, or do you use the same design effectively? If you use the existing app more or less because it does the job and just needs improvements and enhancements, maybe new features, adjustments to processes, etc., you'll have a much easier time of it. The skill levels of the analysts and designers are not as critical since you have essentially a working prototype as a starting point. Typically, we'll take screenshots and mark them up with changes. Same thing goes for reports, import-export integration procedures, and so on. You want involvement from existing users, process owners, and subject matter experts, as well as other stakeholders, to ensure you take advantage of the opportunity to improve things, but they'll all be reacting to something that already exists. This provides focus, and the context makes it easier to scope the project and keep it focused. Often, it's very tempting to use this end-of-life scenario to declare that the existing app is just not worth duplicating, even with improvements. You'll know you're in this situation when the list of changes and additions is long and the scope is getting out of hand. Another possibility is that the users, process owners, or others tell you flat out they don't like the existing app and don't think it's a good template for the future. This happens all the time due to changes in the marketplace, business mergers and acquisitions, or even just improvements in technology. For example, why build yet another desktop app that needs an access to a local area network when many of the users are on mobile devices out in the field? What used to be a single app with a single user interface could now be much better architected with a blend of devices and storage locations that take advantage of mobile computing and cloud services. Sounds great, right? The challenge is that a complete rewrite requires much, much higher skills for the business analysts, designers, and so on that are involved in the process. Matching business needs to technologies and application functionality is not trivial. Business process reengineering is going to have a long-lasting and possibly far-reaching impact on your organization. If you search the web for recommendations regarding application rewrites, you're going to see a lot of dire warnings. And if you read a large number of such articles, you're going to see the consensus is that this is a much higher risk proposition compared to reusing the same design. In fact, one of the most common horror stories is that organizations embark on a multi-year process to reimagine their application software on a whole new platform with a whole new database, and they end up abandoning it because the project never finishes. It goes massively over budget. It gets way behind schedule. And then you've got that opportunity cost problem when you could have been improving the old app, but the rewrite just sucked up all the resources for a giant net loss. This is why Alto recommends that you consider a hybrid approach. Our hybrid approach says that the existing app stays largely intact. We stop investing in new features, new functionality, and even bug fixes. If there are sections of the app that aren't worth fixing for various reasons, even fixes stop being applied to the existing application. All new features and new functionality are done in parallel using other platforms, possibly other databases, other programming languages, and so on. The hybrid approach is best when you're not forced to replace the application in one go, where you can enjoy a phased approach where the existing app keeps running over a much longer time frame. Going back to that previous example I mentioned where it had a desktop application that required to be connected to a local area network, a hybrid approach would keep that existing app running as is and create new components for the mobile users. Over time, and as budgets allow, more and more of that old desktop app can be migrated to the new technology platforms. In this scenario, you'd save the lowest return on investment items for last. If you're not being forced to change, it's possible some low-value features are never migrated. For example, there's usually a host of reports that are only run at the end of the month or the end of a reporting period, like a quarter or something, possibly even annually. These are simply not worth migrating. As long as the reports continue to run, they can run in the old system. They're probably not used by mobile users. None of these features are desirable even to mobile users, so there's no particular reason to spend a fortune making browser-based apps and reports for users who will literally are never interested in using them. There are many options with modern cloud services for bridging the gap between local and cloud resources. Alto has a number of customers with data and services on both sides of the divide. In this age of inexpensive storage, inexpensive CPU cycles, and inexpensive bandwidth, solutions that were impossible, or at least impossibly expensive, are now well within the reach of even the smallest organization. A couple of examples that we've done recently for customers is moving local SQL databases up into the SQL Azure database to support remote and mobile connectivity users. Depending on the nature of your application and the nature of your database, and again, this is something we have to help you analyze, but it's possible that your application will continue to run simply by changing a connection string in the application software to stop pointing to the local device and start pointing to the cloud server. And now suddenly people with tablets and devices and stuff at home, on the road, at client sites continue to be able to use the application even though they're no longer inside the physical office. Another example of a great hybrid approach is to stop trying to add features to an apps that are simply never going to achieve the current standards for best of breed. Great example is customer relationship management, or CRM software features. Many years ago, we had a client with a CRM system that predated email. All right, so the CRM system did not have a spot to put a contact's email address. And so the customer was sort of bridging that lack of functionality by using the secretary's name and spouse's name fields to hold the email address. If you could fit it all in the secretary's name, you put it there, and if it spilled over, the spillover would come out of the spouse's name. And so clearly that was not a terribly good solution. It was very inefficient to try to extract and utilize that email for any purpose. And so clearly that platform was not worth investing into because it simply could not support modern email campaigns and so on. So it makes a ton more sense to say we're going to remove all CRM-related functionality from the line of business app, put that into a cloud-based CRM product, and go from there. So it's not like the entire line of business application was discarded. We're only discarding the CRM aspects of that. Placing orders and tracking orders and planning orders and so on can continue to be done through the old application. It's just the new CRM-related activities are being done in a separate system. Common concern at this point is duplicate data entry. Nobody wants to have to enter information twice, and that's, again, where some careful advanced planning will allow you to do synchronization and other parallelism tactics so that users are not having to do duplicate entry to keep two systems in shape. Another area where a lot of existing apps fall down on are document management and task management. Your line of business software application may do a wonderful job of recording transactions, but there's an awful lot of business activity that is not captured by simply recording transactions. So in a pre-sales type of process, there might have been several emails and a bunch of PDF specification files floating around, maybe some Excel spreadsheets that were calculating cost estimates and so on. All of that activity is lost when the line of business system doesn't have any kind of support for those items. So similar to the CRM arrangement, we've had great success with SharePoint portals up in the cloud that allows pre-sales engineers and salespeople and so on to collaborate on sales-related activities. Perhaps post-installation, there are service and support-related activities that the current application doesn't really capture very well. And again, the SharePoint portal is a great place to capture business activity, and you add the value there rather than trying to retrofit document management and task management into an existing system that was never designed to be able to do that. So a hybrid approach has proved to be a very, very good way to handle things in Alto's experience. In previous live versions of this webinar, we've collected a number of audience questions, and I've got a few of them noted here because I thought that they were particularly insightful questions and certainly deserve to be answered. One is a request for a cost estimation process, and I really wish there was a spreadsheet you could just plug stuff into and estimate what it's going to cost. So my sort of rule of thumb is if you're reusing the same design as you had to your existing application, the new application is probably going to cost about as much as the original did. Now, you're thinking, well, aren't modern software development tools more productive? Aren't modern databases more productive, et cetera? That's absolutely the case. You are much more productive in the newer tools. However, programmers are a lot more expensive than they were back in the day. Your business analysts and so on, your testers, and all those things are correspondingly more expensive. And you're also going to want to take time to re-engineer some of the failings of that existing application. And so that's going to take some time as well. So roughly speaking, you'll probably spend about as much to rewrite the existing application. But that's if you reuse the same specifications. If it's a total rewrite, that's really tough to estimate. It could take 3 or 4 times more than the original application because of just the significant amount of business analyst and subject matter expert time. Testing a completely new app is going to be a lot harder as well. So all of these things are going to add to the cost. Another common question was asking about offshoring. Can I save some costs by offshoring? And the answer is absolutely, especially if you're using the same design. Our experience with offshore development assets are that they are much more effective when they can work off of very, very clear specifications that require very little, ideally no interpretation. So if you have screenshots from the existing system with a markup for changes so that the process is pretty unambiguous, you're going to be a lot more successful. Things get out of whack when there's business reprocessing engineering having to occur and you're expecting people to somehow read between the lines and make improvements, and that's simply not a strong suit for most offshore organizations. Another issue is that the testing is often going to have to be done by local people. Even though the offshore folks will always do their own unit testing and so on, we've found that the final user testing really needs to be done locally with the local people in the organization to make sure that all of the user cases are being handled adequately. And lastly, we've heard from customers that have told us that they're really tired of migrating these apps. They went from, a System 36 into a DOS character mode app, and then from there to Windows XP, and then from there to Windows, 7 or something, and now they're worried again about obsolescence. Is there a platform that's going to have the staying power? And I got to admit, we've been bit here at Alto with technology platforms that looked like they were going to be long-term successful, but turned out not to be. Most notably Silverlight. We got kind of blindsided by that. Microsoft put a ton of money and a ton of marketing and a ton of support into saying Silverlight is the way to go for the future. It sure seemed like a good bet, but then a couple years down the road, suddenly it's abandoned. So nobody wants to make that mistake. So what do we do? And my answer to a future-proof platform is to take a look at the last decade or so of trends, and you're not going to go wrong by using some kind of browser-based technology for your UI and cloud services for the back end. The reason I say that is that combination of a web browser front end and a service-oriented in the cloud back end is supported by a large number of very large players. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they all are offering a huge host, and they're competing to offer a huge host of cloud services to build your apps upon, and all of them are supporting and continues to support browser-based user interfaces. So if I had to pick a platform where I'd be very confident that it's still going to be valid and viable in 10 years, it would be that. All right, well, thank you for attending this webinar. And I'd like to make an offer here for a free application assessment session. It's an $800 value coming here from Alto. We'll have a solution architect. We'll meet you and your team to try to determine the right approach for supporting your legacy software application. We'll do a high-level analysis meeting and write up our findings and document a roadmap with recommendations. So if you're interested in that, there's an email address at the bottom of the slide there, sales@altoconsulting.com. Just drop us a line. We'll be happy to set you up. Our next webinar topic in this series is going to be how to mobilize legacy software applications to take your apps that currently only run on large screen, high capability desktop workstations, how to cost effectively and also user interface effectively migrate those types of applications. So thanks again for attending.